The following are two ghost stories from Australia. Les Nib. The first story took place during World War II in an old house on Shirley Road, Wollstonecraft, Sydney, New South Wales. Private Les Nib was stationed at an old house with another soldier. It was 1943 and their job was to service the large searchlights and track aircrafts. The men were taken in turn to stand guard at night as it was a military establishment. Private Nib had been there 3 weeks and had been on guard duty from 10 p.m. to midnight. After guard duty, he went upstairs to wake up another soldier who was to replace him on duty. He walked up to the first floor to tap the soldier on the shoulder and tell him it was his turn to stand guard. The soldier half woke up and growled, "What, you too?" Then said, "Oh my God, she's here. It must have been her. She woke me up." Because the other soldier was in such a state of panic, Les had no idea what he was talking about and had to calm him down to find out what happened. He told Les that there was a ghost of a woman in the house. Apparently, other soldiers in the house had also seen her and had not told him about her because they wanted him to find out for himself. As Les was about to go back outside, the soldier screamed out, "Don't leave, stay with me." Les thought he was crazy and left the room. It was when he was leaving the room that he saw her, halfway along the passage that went from the front of the house to the back. The woman was standing in the dark at the head of the stairs. Her appearance was milky white, and she looked about 5 feet tall. He could not see her feet, and she looked misty and was wrapped in some type of shawl. As he was observing her, she slowly drifted away from him along the passage towards the back of the house. At the end of the passage was a bathroom, which she seemed to disappear in. Les could not quite believe what he'd seen, and figured one of the men was playing a joke on him by wrapping themselves in a sheet, and decided to pursue the figure into the bathroom. When he reached the bathroom, the door was shut, so he quickly opened it and rushed inside, closing the door behind him. After finding the light switch, he turned it on and found the bathroom completely empty. The only exit was a small window which nobody could have escaped through, not even a small child. But something shocked him even more than seeing the ghost vanish into thin air. As he entered the bathroom, he found the temperature was freezing cold. He'd never felt such a chill in his life. It must have been about 20 degrees, and much colder than outside. But another thing that shocked him was the awful smell. It smelled like decay. He just ran out of the bathroom, but that was not the only weird experience he'd had in the house. One of the large rooms in the house was used as a regimental office, and one evening he was left in charge. There was a large fire burning, and his only company was a unit's pet, which was a cattle dog which could be aggressive until he got used to it. The dog and him were sitting in front of the fire, and was reading a book. Suddenly, he could hear heavy footsteps on the stairwell, going clunk, clunk, one after the other. It sounded like a person walking down the stairs. The dog quickly jumped up, and every hair on his body was bristling, and after a sudden yelp, ran out of the house. Les had to run after him and found him 2 streets away. He found him trembling with fear under a streetlight. He picked him up and carried him back to the house. But as they reached the front gate, the dog panicked and clawed itself loose and ran away again. Some of the other soldiers found him near the station and brought him back to the house, where he was much calmer and was able to enter the house. That was the last eerie experience he experienced while he was there. It is strange that the dog ran away after hearing the footsteps rather than confronting whoever or whatever it was. Most animals are psychic, and the dog knew whatever it was something paranormal and it terrified him. Jan Chu. Jan lived in Maroubra, New South Wales, and for many years had been puzzled by a psychic experience which not only changed her life, but there was no earthly explanation as to what had happened to her. Jan was an only child, and her father died when she was 16, leaving only her and her mother. Life for the mother was not particularly happy, and was quite miserable. Although they had many conversations, she did not consider them to be very close. Her mother passed away on the 7th of June 1986. 3 weeks later, on 30th of June, she decided to spend the weekend with her girlfriend. That night she was spending the night in the spare room, and was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Suddenly, she felt herself being lifted up and transported somewhere. The next moment, she was back at home in her lounge room and was sitting on the floor, which she often liked to do, and standing in front of her was her mother. She looked as solid and real as if she was still alive. She was dressed in trousers and a top and appeared to be floating. But what surprised her even more was that her mother was smiling, which was completely different to how she'd been when she was alive. She looked light, peaceful, and without a care in the world. She could not believe the change in her mother, and she looked so happy. Her mother then moved across the room and sat down on the floor next to her, which she had never ever previously done, and was trying to tell her something. At the same time, Jan was attempting to communicate with her and tell her that despite everything they'd been through when she was still alive, she missed her, and that after she died, realised that they'd been closer than she thought. As her mother was trying to earnestly talk to her, she could not remember what she had said, but it was something about marriage and waiting. But afterwards, it all appeared to have been blocked out. What she did remember telling her mother was that she saw her dead body and she could not die a second time, and what would the police say? Besides, I've given all of your clothes away. After that, her mother threw back her head and laughed, which she'd never seen her do in her life. She felt it must have been wonderful where she was now that caused her to change so much, and Jan wanted a taste of that joy too. She asked her mother what it was like to die, but she suddenly vanished. The next moment, she was back in bed at her friend's house staring at the ceiling again. She tried her best to remember everything her mother had said to her, but everything was blank. She later had another dream of her mother, but it was nothing like what had happened that night. She got annoyed when a friend told her that the first experience with her mother was just a dream also, but Jan knows it was entirely different and was definitely real. Paul and Isabel Zahara. In 1982, Paul and his wife Isabel from Berowra Heights, New South Wales, were returning home one evening around 11:30 p.m. They were on the outskirts of Campbelltown, and as he was turning a corner, and in the glare of the headlights, saw an elderly man standing at the side of the road. The old man had a beard, but there was something very unusual about him. He was dressed in clothes straight out of the 19th century, with a long grey frock coat, brown pants, a high collar and a top hat that was bent in the middle. He was holding on to an old push bike. He was standing so still that it looked like a statue and was staring ahead. Even when the car approached him late at night, the old figure continued to stand totally still, and he continued to stare ahead. There was not so much as a sideways glance. He said it was like travelling back in time. He was so intrigued by the ghostly figure that he wanted to go back and have another look, but was apprehensive about doing so, as was his wife. They both had the strangest feeling that they had just observed an apparition. His wife added that whilst she was staring at the old man, she could see an aura around him. The ghostly figure could well have been a residual haunting. A residual haunting is a type of haunting where a spirit or spectre repeats a past event in a seemingly endless loop. The spirit is unaware of the living people around it.